What sets a filet mignon apart from a tenderloin? And why is it known for being so incredibly tender? We spoke with a group of culinary pros to find out which cut of beef is worth picking up when you're in the mood for something premium. The beef tenderloin is a slim, elongated muscle found in the loin section of the steer, the same region that gives us steakhouse favorites like the New York strip, porterhouse, and T-bone. In fact, both the T-bone and porterhouse steaks include a portion of tenderloin, joined together by that iconic bone. Its location, tucked beneath the ribs and running alongside the spine, explains its notable tenderness. As Aki Suzuki, former general manager at American Cut in New York City, explains, beef tenderloin is a long, cylindrical cut of meat that runs along both sides of the spine. Because the muscles in this area don't support much weight, they stay relatively inactive throughout the steer's life. As a result, they don't build up the tough connective tissue found in more heavily used cuts, like brisket from the chest. It's this minimal connective tissue that gives the tenderloin its famously soft texture. Filet mignon isn't actually a different cut. It's a specific portion taken from the tenderloin itself. As Kilian Gousseau, executive chef at Lafayette Steakhouse in Miami, Florida, puts it, filet mignon is the most tender and smallest part. The tenderloin is a long, multi-sectioned cut of beef. At its thickest point in the center is the Chateaubriand, while a thin strip of meat known as the chain runs alongside it, ideal for slicing into chunks and tossing into a stir-fry. True filet mignon only comes from the tenderloin's slender, tapered front end. This part is typically sliced into small, individual steaks, with the tiniest ones often referred to as tournedos. Be wary of cuts labeled filet. Technically, any boneless beef could carry that name, but only filet mignon delivers that signature melt-in-your-mouth tenderness.
Surprisingly tender.
Tender.
See, I knew you'd like it if you gave it a chance.
Since filet mignon is just a small section of the beef tenderloin, it makes sense that it's much smaller in size. A whole tenderloin, untrimmed and with the outer layers intact, usually weighs around 6 to 7 pounds. That includes about 1.25 pounds of fat and silver skin, plus another 2 pounds from the chain meat. Once fully trimmed, the usable tenderloin generally ends up around 3 pounds, depending on the animal. Out of that, the filet mignon makes up only a small portion. Each filet typically weighs 5 to 6 ounces, and from a single steer, you'll get just 6 to 10 pounds of filet mignon total. That's a pretty small yield compared to the 12 to 14 pounds of tenderloin overall. Filet mignon and beef tenderloin are both prized for their exceptional tenderness, a trait that gives the tenderloin its very name. But as Aki Suzuki points out, filet mignon, being the smaller end cut of the tenderloin, is often even more tender. Matthew Crater, chef de cuisine at Pasties Nashville, shares that view. As he puts it, the filet will have just a slightly softer texture as it works the least in the muscle. This lack of use is what makes it so tender to eat. When it comes to beef, flavor and tenderness don't always go hand in hand. Cuts with bold, rich taste, such as brisket or oxtail, are usually tougher, while ultra-tender options like filet mignon and tenderloin often have a more delicate flavor. As Suzuki notes about these two cuts, they are both mild in flavor compared to other cuts like ribeye or strip steak. That's particularly the case with filet mignon, as Suzuki points out. Filet mignon might have a slightly milder flavor due to its smaller size and finer muscle grain. The unique qualities of filet mignon also contribute to its higher price. Chef Gousseau explains, filet mignon is generally more expensive than beef tenderloin as a whole because it is a smaller, more tender, and more prized cut. Chef Crater shares the same opinion. In his words, I find filet mignon will typically run a little more on the pricey side compared to tenderloin. People tend to see it as a much more fancy and desired cut, at about $112 per pound.
I used to have kind of a taste for trash, but these days it's all prime rib and filet mignon and tenderloin.
Beef tenderloin is ideal when cooked whole, whether served simply by itself or wrapped in pastry for a classic beef Wellington. Both choices create a memorable dish. Chef Crater's recommendation is, if the tenderloin is whole, I would cook it as a roast. It's nice and easy to carve for groups of people. Suzuki shares that perspective, saying, for a dinner party or family gathering, roasting a whole tenderloin is fantastic. When it comes to preparation, Suzuki has some tips. He begins by thoroughly searing the tenderloin on every side to develop a rich caramelized crust. Next, he coats the meat with a blend of herbs such as rosemary, thyme, and garlic before roasting it in the oven. According to him, this method produces a tasty, flavorful crust while keeping the inside tender, juicy, and easy to carve and serve. cooking a whole roast isn't the only option for beef tenderloin. Similar to filet mignon, the tenderloin can be sliced into steaks, which Suzuki recommends for an ideal cozy dinner. He usually starts by searing the steaks in a hot cast iron pan with butter, garlic, and herbs. After that, he finishes cooking them in the oven until they reach the perfect level of doneness. Suzuki explains, this technique provides a nice crust while maintaining tenderness. Chef Gusso prefers to cook both cuts by searing the steaks over high heat to develop a mouth-watering golden crust. After that, he adds, I finish it with thyme, garlic, and butter until it reaches the desired internal temperature. Chef Crater even admits he prefers individual steaks to a whole tenderloin, favoring a pan sear or grilling over roasting. He points out that the intense, direct heat of a cast iron skillet creates a crispy crust that oven roasting rarely achieves. This technique produces a wonderful contrast between the crunchy exterior and the tender, juicy meat inside. Using filet mignon or beef tenderloin for grinding into burgers is practically a butcher's crime. These cuts are prized for their tenderness, which disappears the moment they're put through the grinder. But it's not just the high cost that makes filet and tenderloin poor choices for burgers. Ideal burger meat usually has a fat-to-lean ratio around 80-20 or even 70-30. In contrast, lean cuts like tenderloin and filet mignon contain only about 7 grams of fat per 100 grams, giving them a 93-7 ratio. For the best burger, it's smarter to use fattier, more affordable cuts such as chuck, which naturally carries that 80-20 balance. This tougher, flavorful meat actually improves when ground, as it breaks down some of the chewy connective tissue and transforms into a tender, tasty patty.
Why do you want hamburger when you can have filet mignon?
Both filet mignon and beef tenderloin have relatively low levels of connective tissue and fat compared to many other steaks. Since tenderloin ranks among the leanest beef cuts, it's often seen as a healthier, lower-fat choice compared to richer options like ribeye. However, that leanness comes with some drawbacks. Lean cuts are much less forgiving if overcooked, meaning even a slight lapse in attention can turn these pricey steaks into tough, dry slabs. Additionally, marbling, the small streaks of fat within the muscle, adds essential flavor and moisture to fattier cuts. Because both tenderloin and filet mignon lack this marbling, many chefs and home cooks rely heavily on rich sauces to boost taste and juiciness. While tasty, these sauces add extra fat, which can counteract the health benefits of opting for a leaner steak. Because tenderloin and filet mignon are so lean, it's best to cook them no more than medium rare. Both Suzuki and Chef Crater agree this helps maintain the meat's juiciness and tenderness. As Crater puts it, I would never cook past medium rare. There is not a lot of fat to protect the steak, and it loses its juices pretty quickly. The texture changes quite dramatically once you go past medium. To achieve the ideal medium rare, Suzuki suggests cooking the steak until it reaches an internal temperature between 130 and 135 degrees Fahrenheit. Crater, on the other hand, believes the simplest method is to sear the steak in a cast iron skillet. He explains further, this gets a really nice crust and crispy texture that other cooking methods will not, while not overcooking the steak. Naturally, like with any steak, it's important to let the meat rest before serving to allow the juices to redistribute and keep the inside tender and juicy. Because tenderloin and filet mignon are low in fat, they pair especially well with sauces that provide extra richness and flavor. As Chef Crater explains, both of these steaks are what I would call sauce sponges. When it comes to choosing a sauce, the options are virtually limitless. Aki Suzuki points out that even a simple compound butter, flavored with garlic, herbs, or spices, can elevate the dish. For something indulgent, a French bordelaise sauce made with red wine, bone marrow, and butter is a classic choice. Alternatively, a zesty Argentine chimichurri adds a fresh, lively kick. If you want something quick, a creamy creme fraiche sauce is easy to whip up, while a more sophisticated pan sauce like au poivre will definitely impress. In short, the possibilities are endless. If you're thinking about adding some premium bacon to your steak, filet mignon might be the way to go. Many butchers, chefs, and home cooks enhance flavor and fat by wrapping their fillets in bacon. This method not only bastes the steak in smoky, flavorful fat as it cooks, but it also helps keep the narrow end of the fillet from splitting into two pieces.
I'm gonna go ahead and have the bacon-wrapped filet, please. And if you could double up the bacon on that, that'd be great, thank you.
Go for it, buddy.
Go, Pete!
Yeah, sounds good, huh?
Ripping it, yeah.
To perfect this method, there are a few key tips to remember. Because filet mignon cooks quickly, even when wrapped in bacon, it's crucial to sear the steaks briefly in a pan before finishing them in the oven, where the gentler, indirect heat cooks both bacon and steak evenly. Avoid using thick-cut bacon, as it won't cook through properly without overcooking the steak beyond medium rare. If you like your steak rare, you might want to partially cook the bacon first, either in the oven or microwave, then cool it before wrapping the filet. Although you can buy pre-bacon wrapped filet mignon, sometimes called barded, it's usually much pricier than doing it yourself. When wrapping the bacon around the filet, pull it taut to keep it snug. This helps the steak maintain its shape and prevents the bacon from loosening as the meat shrinks during cooking. Dry aging beef has become quite popular, as it adds a richer, more intense flavor to many steak cuts. However, filet mignon doesn't necessarily benefit from this process. One key purpose of dry aging is to tenderize tougher cuts, but applying it to an already tender piece like tenderloin can produce a mushy, unappealing texture. There's more to consider. Katie Flannery from Flannery Beef points out that dry aging works by letting the outer layers of the meat undergo controlled decay, which leads to significant weight loss, especially problematic for filet mignon. Unlike cuts like the short loin, the tenderloin lacks a protective outer layer, so a large portion must be trimmed away, resulting in waste. Flannery argues that the flavor improvements don't justify doubling the price of an already costly cut. Leftover filet mignon or beef tenderloin is quite uncommon since these lean, pricey cuts are usually served in perfect individual portions. However, if you do happen to have some leftovers, it's best to avoid reheating them, although using a low and slow approach to warm the steak is possible. The chance of drying out the meat makes it a risky move.
Well, you know what they say about tenderloin, always a risky option. It's got to be done just right.
Rather than reheating, let the steak come to room temperature and enjoy it cold. Thin slices of leftover beef tenderloin are especially tasty in sandwiches or sliders. Try using a rich bread like a buttery croissant and add some blue cheese to elevate the flavors. You can also slice the leftover beef to top a Caesar or Cobb salad instead of grilled chicken, giving the dish a unique and delicious twist.